For most of our lives, we're told a simple formula. Work hard now. Sacrifice your time, your energy, even your dreams, because one day, if you're lucky, you'll finally get to live. That distant promise of retirement becomes the light at the end of a very long tunnel. But what if that light is just a mirage? We rarely question what we're trading in the meantime. The birthdays missed, the slow mornings rushed, the creative sparks smothered under deadlines and routines. And yet, we keep telling ourselves, just a little longer, a few more years, then I'll be free. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Freedom isn't something you arrive at when the world finally lets you go. It's a practice, a mindset, a way of living that you can either cultivate or postpone forever. So the real question isn't, how do I retire early? It's, what would it look like to stop waiting and start living now? If that question makes you uncomfortable, or maybe just quietly curious, then stay with me, because this video isn't about escaping the system. It's about rewriting what freedom means to you. But before we can redefine our lives, we need to redefine our language. We use words like freedom all the time, financial freedom, location freedom, freedom of time, but rarely do we stop to ask, freedom for what? If we don't understand what we're chasing, we might spend years running towards someone else's dream. So let's begin by stripping the word down to its essence. What does freedom truly mean when no one else is watching? When most people hear the word freedom, their minds jump to external circumstances, quitting a job, traveling the world, waking up without an alarm clock. But freedom, in its purest form, is an internal state. It's the quiet confidence that your days reflect your values, that your actions are in alignment with who you really are. Too often, we equate freedom with the absence of obligation. We dream of a life with no meetings, no commutes, no one telling us what to do. But if you remove all of that, and you still feel aimless, disconnected, or unfulfilled, was that ever freedom to begin with? True freedom isn't just about what you escape from. It's about what you move toward. It's being able to say no without guilt, and yes without fear. It's having the clarity to choose your direction, and the courage to walk it, even if it doesn't look impressive to anyone else. Some people find freedom by simplifying, others by creating, some by slowing down, others by building something that feels meaningful, even if the world calls it impractical. What all these paths have in common is intention, a sense that life isn't just happening to you, but through you. That's what separates distraction from devotion, and routine from ritual. So when we talk about freedom in this video, we're not just talking about having money or free time, although those can help. We're talking about the deeper kind, the kind that lets you show up for your life fully awake, the kind that doesn't require permission, and most importantly, the kind that doesn't wait. Because here's the quiet tragedy. So many of us are postponing the most vivid, honest parts of ourselves until some faraway future, only to find that when that future finally comes, we've forgotten how to live. And maybe the hardest part about freedom is that it asks us to be honest, not just about what we want, but about what we've been settling for. It invites us to confront the subtle ways we've abandoned ourselves, by saying yes when we meant no, by staying silent when something inside us wanted to speak, by mistaking comfort for peace. True freedom isn't always easy or gentle. Sometimes, it's the quiet discomfort of growth, of stepping into a life that reflects who we are, not just who we've been told to be. But if freedom is something we can cultivate today, why do so many of us keep waiting? Why do we cling to the idea that life begins later, after the bills are paid, after the career is over, after we've finally earned rest? To understand that, we need to look at the story we've been sold. Because the myth of retirement isn't just about money, it's about identity, control, and a very old promise that was never really ours to begin with. For decades, we've been handed a story: work for 40 years, save consistently, follow the rules, and one day you'll be rewarded with freedom. This promise is so familiar, it rarely gets questioned. It's baked into the language we use: putting in your time, planning for the future, earning your rest. But beneath that well-meaning narrative lies a subtle trap. The modern retirement model was never designed with fulfillment in mind. It was created in an era where life expectancy barely reached beyond retirement age. The idea was simple: keep people productive during their prime years, then offer a brief window of rest before life wound down. In other words, retirement wasn't freedom, it was a gentle exit. Today, that model no longer fits the world we live in. We live longer, think differently, and carry emotional and creative needs that don't vanish the moment we leave the workforce. Yet the narrative persists, and so we defer joy, curiosity, self-discovery, thinking we're being responsible. But here's the deeper issue. When we internalize the retirement myth, we subconsciously tie freedom to age, to wealth, to some fixed point in the future. We tell ourselves that only once we've accumulated enough money, status, security, will we finally deserve to live on our own terms. That belief does more than delay fulfillment. It trains us to tolerate misalignment. We endure toxic jobs, numb routines, and quiet dissatisfaction because this is just how it is, for now. We normalize burnout and emptiness because they're framed as temporary sacrifices. But temporary often turns into decades. And by the time the finish line appears, many find themselves too tired, too cynical, or too lost to know what freedom even looks like anymore. Even more quietly, the retirement myth teaches us not to trust ourselves. Instead of asking what kind of life would energize and expand us today, we ask what's realistic. We become experts in postponement, but beginners in presence. We get better at surviving, but forget how to design a life we actually want to inhabit. This isn't about dismissing the value of planning. It's about asking, what exactly are we planning for? A future where we finally get to become ourselves? What if the cost of waiting is forgetting who that self even is? The truth is, no one hands you permission to live freely, and no milestone, whether it's a birthday or a bank balance, automatically delivers purpose. So maybe it's time to rethink the question, not when can I retire, but rather, what small part of me is already tired of waiting? In many ways, the retirement myth isn't just personal, it's cultural. It's woven into how we define success: the long hours, the hustle, the silent suffering that's supposed to lead somewhere better. We admire those who sacrifice today for a vague tomorrow, as if endurance is more noble than joy. But what this story rarely admits is that the finish line keeps moving. Inflation rises, life gets more expensive, and that magical number we once aimed for, whether in age or savings, slips further out of reach. So we push harder, delay longer, until the idea of rest becomes not a reward, but a distant mirage. And the real danger? We become so conditioned to surviving that even when the door to freedom opens, we don't know how to walk through it. We mistake exhaustion for purpose, and we forget how to trust ease. Because when we spend years waiting, telling ourselves that life starts later, we don't just delay joy. We begin to lose parts of ourselves along the way. The subtle cost of waiting isn't always visible on the outside, but inside, something starts to dim. Let's take a closer look at what we're really sacrificing when we postpone the life we long for. When we think about postponing freedom, we often frame it as a smart trade-off. Work now, live later. But what we rarely acknowledge is the emotional interest we pay on that delay, quiet, steady, and compounding. Each time we tell ourselves, I'll explore that passion someday, or I'll slow down once things settle. We're not just rescheduling joy, we're suppressing it. And the more we do that, the harder it becomes to remember what joy even felt like in the first place. Over time, this delay becomes less of a strategy and more of a habit. We get used to silencing the voice that whispers, "This isn't it." We stop noticing the tension in our chest, the fatigue behind our eyes, the dull ache that comes from a life that looks fine but feels off. And eventually, something shifts. It starts with small things. You begin to feel disconnected from your own choices. You go through the motions, not because they fulfill you, but because they're familiar. The spark that once pulled you toward life becomes a flicker, not gone, but quieter, more fragile. And it's not just emotional. Delaying freedom can reshape our sense of identity. When we spend years playing roles, worker, provider, achiever, we risk losing touch with the parts of us that don't produce or perform. The artist, the dreamer, the person who once stayed up late not for work, but for wonder. There's also a more subtle cost, regret, not the loud, dramatic kind, but the soft kind that creeps in when we realize we were always waiting for a better moment, and somehow it never came. Regret often shows up quietly, in the form of questions. What if I had taken that risk earlier? What would have happened if I'd said yes to that version of myself? These aren't just mental curiosities, they're reflections of a life half-lived. And perhaps the hardest part is this: the longer we delay, the more we convince ourselves that delay is all we know. We build routines around postponement. We call them responsibilities. And slowly, we start to believe that freedom is a fantasy meant for someone else, someone luckier, braver, richer, younger. But freedom is not an inheritance, it's a relationship, one that weakens when neglected, and one that deepens when nourished, moment by moment, choice by choice. So, if you feel like something is missing, if your days feel like rehearsals for a life that never quite begins, that feeling isn't a flaw, it's a signal. It's your inner compass trying to reorient you towards something more real, more alive, more you. And no matter how long it's been, it's not too late to listen. The beauty of this realization is that it doesn't have to end in regret, because the path to freedom isn't some massive leap, it's a return to small choices, to deliberate attention, to the parts of life we've been rushing past. So let's talk about what it actually looks like to stop waiting and start living, right here, right now. Living freely isn't about quitting your job tomorrow or escaping to some remote village. It's about shifting the center of gravity in your life, from reaction to intention. When we stop living on autopilot, we begin to notice how much of our day is shaped by habit, obligation, or fear of disappointing others. We check emails before we even open our eyes. We say yes to things that drain us. We fill our calendars so completely that even rest becomes another task to manage. But what if freedom began with something smaller? It could be as simple as reclaiming the first 10 minutes of your morning. Instead of reaching for your phone, you sit in silence. You breathe. You ask yourself, what matters today? Not what's urgent, not what's expected, but what feels meaningful. These small pauses are where freedom begins, because they remind you that life isn't a race to the next milestone. It's a relationship with your body, your time, your values. Living proactively also means learning to disappoint the right people. You will never be able to live freely if your first instinct is always to please. There will be emails you don't answer right away, invitations you decline, expectations you gently let go of, not out of selfishness, but out of alignment. Another powerful shift: start replacing "I have to" with "I choose to." I have to go to work becomes I choose to earn for now, but I'm also building a way out. I have to stay here becomes I'm choosing stability while I plan my next step. Language matters. It shapes how we relate to our choices and whether we feel trapped or empowered by them. And then there's the role of presence. Freedom isn't always about changing your life dramatically. It's also about changing how you inhabit the life you already have. Eating slowly instead of scrolling through lunch. Listening, really listening, when someone speaks to you. Letting a sunset stop you in your tracks without feeling guilty that you're not being productive. Presence turns ordinary moments into sacred ones. It trains you to feel alive now, not someday. And if you're thinking, but I don't have the luxury for all this, you're not alone. Most people feel like freedom is something reserved for the lucky few. But real freedom isn't about luxury. It's about clarity. And clarity can be built. Start with a single hour a week. An hour where you do something that has no goal other than to nourish you. Write, walk, sit in a park, call someone you love without a reason. If that hour feels impossible, even 15 minutes can shift your state. What matters is not the length, it's the intention. And slowly, something begins to change. You start to remember what your inner voice sounds like. You begin to notice what gives you energy and what quietly depletes it. You become less afraid of missing out because you're no longer missing your own life. Living proactively doesn't mean you have everything figured out. It means you're no longer postponing the parts of life that give it texture, beauty, and depth. And maybe, just maybe, you'll discover that the freedom you've been chasing isn't waiting at the end of the road. It's been walking beside you this whole time, quietly waiting for you to turn and say, let's begin. Because the truth is, you don't need to escape your life to find freedom. You just need to inhabit it more fully. To stop outsourcing your sense of meaning to weekends, to vacations, to some future you that always seems just out of reach. Freedom isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like making tea without rushing, or finally giving yourself permission to want something different, even if you can't act on it yet. It's the moment you stop measuring your life by productivity and start measuring it by presence. And yes, there will be days where you forget, where the noise gets too loud, the pace too fast. But freedom isn't a state you reach and stay in. It's something you return to again and again with gentleness, not guilt. So if you're still waiting for permission, let this be it. Not to change everything overnight, but to start listening to the quieter voice inside you, the one that knows what matters, the one that's been whispering for years. This life, your real life, is not on hold. It's here. It's unfolding, and it's yours to claim. One small choice at a time. So maybe freedom was never about waiting. Maybe it was about waking up to the choices we've been given, to the life that's already in front of us, and to the power we hold to shape it quietly, slowly, deliberately, not someday, but now. If this video helped you see your life a little differently, if it stirred something quiet but honest inside you, consider subscribing to the channel. There are more myths to unlearn, more truths to reclaim. And if you turn on the notification bell, you won't miss the next time we peel another layer back together. Let's keep walking this path, intentionally, freely, and fully awake.